Hello everyone, today I will read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Rockade. Harry read the story again. The vote that was searched had in fact been emptied earlier that same day. Hagrid had emptied vote 713, if we could call it emptying, taking out that grumpy little package. Had that been what the thieves were looking for? As Harry and Ron walked back to their castle for dinner, the Parkers wait. That was Rock's case. They'd been too polite to refuse. Harry thought that none of the lessons he'd had so far had given him as much to think about that tea with Hagrid. Had Hagrid collected that package just in time? Or was it now? And did Hagrid know something about Snape that he didn't want to tell Harry? Chapter 9. The Midnight Duel. Harry had never believed he would meet the boy he hated more than Dudley, but that was before he met Draco Malfoy. Still, first year, Gryffindors only had potions with their Slytherins, so they didn't have to put up with Malfoy much. Or at least, they didn't until they sported a Nautic's pinned up either Gryffindor common rule which made them all grunt. Flying lessons would be starting on Thursday at Gryffindor, and Slytherin would be learning together. Typical, said Harry darkly, just what I always wanted. You make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy. He had been looking forward to learning to fly more than anything else. You don't know, you'll make a fool of yourself, said Ron reasonably. Anyway, I know. Morpheus always going on about how good he is at Quidditch. But I bet that's all talk. Malfoy certainly did talk about flying a lot. He complained loudly about first years never getting in their house did Quidditch teams and told long, boastful stories which always seemed to end with him narrowly escaping muggles in helicopters. He wasn't the only one, though. The way Seamus Finnegan told it. He'd spent most of his childhood zooming around the countryside on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who'd listen about the time he'd almost hit a hang glider on Charlie's old broom. Everyone from visiting families talked about Quidditch. Constantly, Ron had already had a big argument with Dean Thomas, who shared their dormitory about football. Ron couldn't see what was exciting about a game with only one ball where no one was allowed to fly. Harry had caught Ron prodding this part of West Ham football team, trying to make their players move. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life because his grandmother had never let him near one. Privately, Harry felt she'd had good reason because Neville managed to have an extraordinary number of accidents even with both feet on the ground. Her one Granger was almost as nervous about flying as Neville was. This was something you couldn't learn by heart out of a book, one that she hadn't tried. At breakfast on Thursday, she bored them all stupid with flying tips she'd got out of a library book called Quidditch Through the Ages. Neville was hanging onto her every word, desperate for anything that might help him hang onto his broomstick later. But everybody else was very pleased when everyone's lecture was interrupted by the arrival of the post. Harry hadn't had a single letter since Harry's note, something that Malfoy had been quick to notice. Of course, Malfoy's ego was always bringing him packages of chopped squeeze from home, which he opened grudgingly at the airing table. Barn brought Neville a small package from his grandmother. He opened it excitedly and showed them a glass bowl the size of a large marble, which seemed to be full of white smoke. They remember, he explained. Grand knows I've got things. This tells you if there's something you've forgotten to do. Look, hold it tight like this, and if it turns red, oh, his face fell because Remember had suddenly grown scarlet. You've forgotten something. Neville was trying to remember what he'd forgotten when Draco Malfoy. He was passing the Gryffindor table, snatched the Remember loud up his hand. Harry and Ron jumped to their feet. They were half hoping for a reason to fight Malfoy, but Professor McGonagall, who could spot trouble quicker than any teacher in the school, was there in a flash. What's going on? Malfoy's got my Remember, Professor scolding. Malfoy quickly dropped the Remember back on the table, just looking, he'd said. And he slipped away with Crabbe and Goyle behind him. At 3:30 that afternoon, Harry, Ron, and the other Gryffindors hurried down their front steps into the grounds for their first flying lesson. It was a clear, breezy day, and the glass rippled under their feet as they marched down the sloping lawns towards a smooth lawn on the opposite side of the grounds to the Forbidden Forest, whose trees were swaying darkly in the distance. The Slytherins were already there, and so were 20 broomsticks, lying in neat lines on the ground. Harry had heard Fred and George Weasley complain about the school brooms, saying that some of them started to vibrate, they flew too high, or always flew slightly to the left. Their teacher, Madame Hooch, arrived. She had short gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. Well, what are you all waiting for? She barked. Everyone stand by a broomstick. Come on, hurry up. Harry glanced down at his broom. It was sewed. Some of the twigs stuck out at odd angles. Stick out your right hand over your broom, called Madame Hooch at your front, and say up. Up, everyone shouted. Harry's broom jumped into his hand at once, but it was one of the few that did. Hermione Rangers had simply rolled over on the ground, and Neville's hadn't moved at all. Perhaps brooms, like horses, could tell when you were afraid, thought Harry. There was a quiver in Neville's voice that had told too clearly that he wanted to keep his feet on the ground. Madame Hooch then showed them how to mount their brooms without sliding off the end, and walked up and down the rows, correcting their grips. Harry and Ron were delighted when she told Malfoy he'd been doing it wrong for years. Now, when I blow my whistle, to kick up from the ground hard, said Madame Hooch. Keep your broom steady, rise they feel fit. Then come straight back down by leaning forward slightly on my whistle there too. But I feel nervous and jumpy and frightened of being left on the ground, pushed off hard before the whistle had touched Madame Hooch sleeps. Come back, boy, she shouted. But Neville was rising straight up like a coke short out of a bottle, 12 feet. 3 feet. Harry saw his scared, white face look down at the ground falling away, saw him gasp, slip sideways up the broom, and wham! A third and a nasty crack, and Neville lay face down on the grass in a heap. His broomstick was still rising higher and higher and started to drift lazily towards the forbidden forest and out of sight. Madame Hooch was bending over Neville, her face as white as his. Broken wrist. Harry heard her mutter. Come on, boy, it's all right. Up you get. She turned to the rest of the class. None of you is to move while I take this boy to the hospital wing. You leave those brooms where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear. Neville, his face turned straight, clutching his wrist, hobbled up his Madame Hooch, who had her arm around him no sooner were they out of earshot than Malfoy burst into laughter. Did you see his face, the great lump? The other Slytherins joined in up. Malfoy snapped Pervati Petu, sticking up for Longbottom, said Pansy Parkinson. A hard-faced Slytherin girl. Never thought you'd like fat little crybabies, Parvati. Look, said Malfoy, darkling toward and something out of the grass. That stupid thing, Longbottom's glance at him. The rainbow glittered in the sun as he held it up. Give that here, Malfoy said Harry quickly. Everyone stopped talking to watch Malfoy smile nastily. I think I will leave it somewhere for Longbottom to collect. How about up the tree? Give it here. Harry yelled, but Malfoy had leapt it onto his broomstick and taken off. He hadn't been lying. He could fly well. Hovering level with the topmost branches of an oak, he called, "Come, let's get Potter." Harry grabbed his broom. "No," shouted Hermione Granger. "Madame Hooch told us not to move. You'll get us all into trouble." Harry ignored her. Blood was pounding in his ears. He mounted the broom and kicked hard against the round and up he soared.